My name is Brandy Culp. I'm 32 years old, and when all of this happened, I still believed being dependable was a virtue that would someday be rewarded. I was wrong. I'm a litigation attorney in a mid-sized Midwestern city, the kind people drive through, not to. The skyline is modest, the winters are brutal, and most of my professional life takes place under flickering fluorescent lights, inside windowless conference rooms, arguing over contracts that other people didn't bother to read carefully the first time. I'm good at what I do, not flashy, not dramatic, just reliable. That word followed me long before I ever set foot in a courtroom. I'm the oldest child in my family. My younger brother, Evan, is 2 years younger than me. If you asked my parents to describe us, they'd smile in that practiced, harmless way and say, Brandy is dependable. Evan is special. Special was the family code word. It meant fragile. It meant misunderstood. It meant protected. Growing up, I was the kid who didn't need reminders. Homework done. Permission slip signed. Alarm set. I learned early that competence made adults comfortable, and comfort in our house meant silence. If something broke, computer, car, relationship, someone would inevitably say, Brandy will handle it. Evan, meanwhile, just needed time. Time to mature. Time to figure himself out. Time to recover from mistakes no one ever let him fully feel. My parents weren't monsters, that's important. My dad is an electrician. My mom is a nurse. They worked hard, paid bills, packed lunches. They helped where they could with my undergraduate tuition. When I got into law school, we all agreed I'd take out loans. Money was tight. No resentment there. I signed the papers. I studied until my eyes burned. I graduated. During my second year of law school, Evan dropped out of his graphic design program 3 states away. According to him, the vibes were off. He moved back home, maxed out a credit card my parents kept for emergencies, and totaled their car less than a month later. I found out because my mom called me sobbing. Brandy, she said, her voice breaking, you're so good with this stuff. Can you look at the paperwork? Maybe talk to the bank? Then, softer, almost automatic. Your brother didn't mean it. He just gets overwhelmed. So I did what I always did. I drove home that weekend, organized bills, called the bank, spoke to insurance, drafted a hardship letter. I didn't pay the debt. I couldn't, but I gave them a roadmap. That was my mistake. Because once you prove you're capable, people stop asking whether it's fair to keep asking. From then on, every mess Evan made came with my name attached. Lease issues, HR problems, missed payments. My parents would call me first, not to help, but to translate. What should we say? Who should we call? If I ever suggested Evan join the conversation, my mom would sigh. He's embarrassed, Brandy. Don't make it harder for him. Fast forward 10 years. I'm a mid-level associate at a solid firm. I pay my student loans. I own a condo with matching furniture. I buy groceries without doing mental math in the aisle. That's when I meet Daniel. He's warm, grounded, and quietly observant in a way that sneaks up on you. On our third date, after I casually told a story about fixing one of Evan's latest problems, Daniel asked, So, when do they let him figure things out himself? I laughed it off. It's just easier if I handle it. Daniel didn't argue. He just tilted his head and said, Easier for who? That question stayed with me longer than it should have. My parents liked Daniel. He has that effortless likability that makes waiters overshare. But I noticed something early on. When Daniel talked about his own family, there were boundaries. No, we're not co-signing that. No, she can't stay with us rent-free. Hearing that out loud felt like listening to a language I understood, but had never been allowed to speak. Daniel proposed on a quiet Sunday night. No fireworks, no audience. We were lying on the couch, exhausted, and he asked, Do you want to do this forever? I said yes before he finished the sentence. We made one rule immediately. We pay for our own wedding. No strings, no leverage. We booked a brick venue downtown. Big windows, exposed beams, that Pinterest industrial chic look. June, 18 months out. Contract signed. Deposits paid. For the first time in my life, something felt firmly mine. I didn't realize yet that my family saw it differently. They always had. And they were about to remind me. At first, everything stayed calm. Too calm. About 2 months after Daniel and I locked in our venue, my younger brother Evan announced he was dating someone seriously. Her name was Tessa. She was fine, polite, attractive, very curated, the kind of woman whose life looked like a highlight reel. even when she was just passing the salt. Within 10 minutes of meeting her at a family dinner, I clocked 3 things immediately. She wanted a big ring, she wanted a big wedding, and she wanted big public attention. None of that was my business, or so I told myself. 6 months later, exactly 1 year before Daniel and I were set to get married, Evan proposed. Tessa posted the video before I even heard about it from my parents. There was a sparkler fountain, dramatic music, and a caption that read, "He finally made it official." The comments were full of "finally," which felt strange considering they'd been together for barely half a year. My parents were ecstatic. "We're so happy both our kids are settling down," my mom said, dabbing at her eyes like she was watching a commercial designed to emotionally manipulate her. "We'll just have to figure out the timing so we can celebrate you both properly." I smiled politely. "We already booked our wedding, June 12th next year." She blinked. "Oh, right, you did say that." There are moments you don't recognize as warning shots until much later. That was one of them. In the months that followed, anything remotely related to weddings slowly stopped being about ours. My mom would call under the pretense of asking about our plans, and within 5 minutes, she'd be deep into Tessa's Pinterest boards. "They're thinking maybe a destination wedding," she said once, "or something really unique. They don't want it to feel small." Daniel, who was chopping vegetables beside me, raised an eyebrow. I put the phone on speaker. "Small compared to what?" Daniel asked calmly. There was a pause. "Oh, no, I didn't mean your wedding," my mom backpedaled quickly. "Just in general." The first ask came not long after. Mom called me one afternoon while I was between depositions. "So, honey, your brother was wondering if maybe you could push your date a bit, just to give everyone some breathing room." I closed my office door. "We've already booked everything," I said carefully. "Well, maybe the venue would understand," she replied. "You're a lawyer. You know how to talk to people." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mom, contracts aren't about understanding. They're about dates, money, and signatures." She sighed. "You're so rigid sometimes. Can't you at least ask?" "No," I said. It was the smallest rebellion I'd ever committed. "I'm not going to ask vendors to rearrange a date we chose over a year ago because Evan just got engaged." Silence. Then, softer, "Your brother feels like you're not happy for him." "I am happy for him," I said. "His happiness doesn't require me to undo 18 months of planning." We ended the call politely. "Love you." "Love you too." But that familiar knot settled in my stomach. After that, the requests didn't stop. They just changed shape. "Could you maybe not do a plated dinner? They don't want theirs to look cheaper." "Do you really need that many guests? People might feel pressured to attend both." "Would you be upset if we used the same color scheme? Tessa loves dusty blue." It was like our wedding had become a spreadsheet cell they needed to adjust so Evan's plans could balance. Daniel saw it clearly. "They're treating your wedding like a placeholder," he said one night while we triple-checked our budget. "Like something they can move around on a calendar." "They're just excited," I said automatically. Daniel reached across the table and covered my hand. "I love you," he said gently, "but you always say it's fine when it very much isn't." I didn't respond. Because part of me still believed that if I stayed calm, stayed flexible, stayed good, this would all sort itself out. My mom started using phrases like setting a good example and being the mature one. Apparently, being the older sister meant my adult life was infinitely adjustable. The pressure built slowly, comment by comment, guilt trip by guilt trip. Until one Tuesday afternoon, 3 months before our wedding, everything cracked. I was in my office drafting a motion when my phone buzzed with a family group chat notification. I usually muted it during work hours, but the preview read, "Update on the weddings." I opened it and felt my stomach drop. The message sat there on my screen, glowing brighter than it should have. "Mom, we're so excited to share that Evan and Tessa have picked their engagement party date. We've decided to have it on June 12th so everyone can be together and we don't have to make people travel twice. We'll treat that as the main family event and celebrate Brandy and Daniel properly later when things are less hectic." I read it once, then again. My chest tightened, not in a dramatic way, not yet, but in that slow, sinking way you feel when you already know what's coming next. My phone buzzed again, a private text from my mom. "Your wedding date has been canceled. Your brother scheduled his engagement party on the same day. It makes no sense to split the family. We'll help you find a better time. Love you." Canceled. Like it was a dentist appointment, like something she had the authority to erase. I stared at the message in my swivel chair, the low hum of the office air conditioning suddenly deafening. For a second, I wondered if I'd misread it, if maybe my brain had skipped a word, misunderstood a tone. So I scrolled back. Photos of the venue, dress fittings, vendor confirmations, save the date reminders. June 12th, everywhere. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, deleted, retyped. When you say canceled, do you mean you and Dad won't be coming on June 12th? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Brandy, honey, we can't ask people to choose between the two of you. That would be selfish. Evan and Tessa's event will be bigger and easier to center everyone around. You and Daniel are more low-key. You'll understand. There it was. You'll understand. The phrase that had carried my entire childhood on its back. I sat there longer than I should have. Thought about every late-night phone call. Every crisis quietly handed to me. Every time being mature meant swallowing disappointment so someone else wouldn't have to feel it. I thought about Daniel, about the contracts, about the money we'd already spent. Our money. None of it said subject to younger siblings' schedule, so I replied with one sentence. That's fine. Mom answered immediately. I knew you'd understand. You're such a good big sister. I closed my eyes. That night I showed Daniel everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't swear. He didn't pace. He just read. Then he looked at me and said, "We have options." I nodded. "We can cancel and resent them forever," he continued. "Or we can stop acting like they own our wedding." We pulled out the contracts. Canceling or moving the date meant losing most of what we'd already paid. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money we'd saved for years. "So," I said slowly. "So," Daniel said, "we get married on June 12th. Quietly, on our terms." We reduced the guest list. Kept people who had shown up consistently. Daniel's family, close friends, a few relatives who'd never treated us like an inconvenience. We informed the venue that only Daniel and I could authorize changes. We asked security to follow our guest list. Then I texted my parents. "We're keeping June 12th. You're welcome to attend, but we're not changing our plans." The call came seconds later. My mom was crying, saying it was selfish, that I was putting her in an impossible position, that Evan would be devastated. I stayed calm. "You made a decision without asking," I said. "Now we're making ours." They told people we'd postponed, that I wasn't ready, that we'd decided to elope later. I didn't correct them. Protecting their version of the story wasn't my job anymore. The week of the wedding, Daniel and I took time off work. We confirmed every vendor, dropped off decorations, triple-checked the ceremony time. 2 days before the wedding, my mom texted me again. "Reminder, Evan's engagement party is Saturday at 3. Our ceremony was at 2. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with my heart racing, wondering, briefly, if I was breaking my family. Daniel held my face and said, "We're not doing anything wrong. We're just refusing to disappear." And that was the moment I knew. Whatever happened next, I could live with it. The day itself didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in when you finally stop bracing for impact. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the venue, catching in the exposed beams we'd fallen in love with a year and a half earlier. The space smelled faintly of flowers and polished wood. Friends moved around softly, helping with last-minute details, laughing in low voices like they understood, instinctively, that this day deserved gentleness. It wasn't the guest list I'd once imagined, but it was honest. Daniel stood at the front, hands clasped, eyes steady. When I walked down the aisle, I didn't hear whispers or feel eyes weighing me down. I saw faces that had chosen us. Faces that hadn't asked us to shrink so someone else could feel bigger. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The ceremony was simple, personal, sunlit. When we said our vows, Daniel's voice cracked, not from nerves, but from relief, from the truth of it, from finally being allowed to stand in something that belonged to us without apology. People laughed at the right moments, cried at the wrong ones. Someone sniffled loudly during the vows, and Daniel squeezed my hand like he was grounding both of us in the reality of it. We were doing this. During the reception, my phone stayed face down on the table. I could feel it vibrating every few minutes, like a pulse I refused to check. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My parents, Evan, probably Tessa. I didn't answer. We danced, we toasted, we laughed. And then, without drama, without confrontation, we left. Straight to the airport. Somewhere over the Rockies, I turned my phone back on. The messages came flooding in. Angry, confused, accusatory. My parents had shown up at the venue, expecting to stop a wedding they'd decided didn't exist anymore, only to find empty chairs and staff politely explaining that the ceremony had already happened. The engagement party started late. Guests were confused. Tessa was furious. I sent one message. Calm, clear, final. "We told you months ago we were keeping our date. You chose to schedule another event and tell people our wedding was canceled. We simply went forward with what we booked and paid for. Then I put my phone away. Our honeymoon was everything it needed to be. Quiet mornings, long walks, the kind of laughter that comes from releasing something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying for decades. When we got back, we went low contact. Extended family reached out slowly. Some apologized. Some admitted they'd been misled. A few told me they were proud of us for standing our ground. Evan blamed me for ruining his engagement party. I didn't respond. A year later, Evan and Tessa married on a different date. We sent a gift. We didn't attend. Life didn't reset itself into something perfect, but it did become clearer. My relationship with my parents is distant now. Polite, careful. I'm no longer the fixer, no longer the backup plan. Daniel and I built a life surrounded by people who showed up, not the ones who tried to cancel us. And for the first time, that feels like exactly the family I need. People like to ask what happened after, as if there must have been a dramatic showdown, a screaming match, a tearful apology, some cinematic moment where everyone finally understood what they'd done. There wasn't. There was just distance, the kind that grows quietly when you stop reaching first. After the wedding and the honeymoon, Daniel and I slipped into a new rhythm, one that didn't include constant explanations or emotional negotiations. We stopped volunteering information, stopped smoothing things over, stopped anticipating everyone else's feelings before our own. At first, my parents didn't seem to notice. They sent polite texts, holiday greetings, the occasional article my mom thought I'd find interesting. When we did talk, the conversation stayed shallow. Weather, work, neutral territory. They never apologized. Not really. Once, months later, my mom said, "I still don't understand why you didn't just move the date. It would have been easier for everyone." And that's when I realized something important. They truly believed easier for everyone didn't include me. Evan didn't change. He complained to relatives that I'd embarrassed him, that I'd chosen drama over family. Tessa unfollowed me on social media, then refollowed months later like nothing had happened. Daniel watched all of this quietly. One night, after a particularly awkward phone call with my parents, he asked, "Do you miss how things were?" I thought about it, about the late-night crisis calls, about being praised for my patience instead of protected, about love that only flowed smoothly when I made myself small. "No," I said, "I miss who I thought we were." That grief surprised me more than the conflict ever did. Because letting go wasn't about anger. It was about accepting reality. A year later, Evan and Tessa got married. Different date, big event, lots of photos. We sent a gift. We didn't attend. No announcement, no explanation. No one asked why. And maybe that was the clearest answer of all. My parents and I exist now in a careful, limited version of a relationship. Birthdays, major holidays, neutral ground. They still call me dependable. I don't correct them. I just don't perform the role anymore. Daniel and I celebrated our second anniversary recently. Cheap champagne, takeout, scrolling through wedding photos. At one point he joked, "Can you believe your mom still tells people you elope to avoid conflict?" I laughed, then stopped, because it hadn't been eloping, and it hadn't been about spite. It was about finally understanding that being strong doesn't mean being endlessly flexible, that love doesn't require self-erasure. That family isn't defined by who feels entitled to you, but by who shows up when you don't bend. For most of my life, I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the adjustable one, the one who would understand. Now, I'm just Brandy Culp, and my life no longer exists as a contingency for someone else's comfort.